You're listening to The Other 50%, a herstory of Hollywood. I'm Julie Harris Walker. This is the podcast where I talk to successful women in entertainment and hear their stories. I am happy to announce our new presenting sponsor, the end-to-end production solution, Green Slate. Producers no longer need to go to the production office to approve time cards, approve POs, review reports, and more, because with Green Slate, you don't have to. Everything is digital, everything is on the app, and you can work from wherever you are. Now, here's where we get meta. I am also announcing that I have taken a position with Green Slate. I'm the new SVP of West Coast Operations. So if you are tired of the old guard in payroll, you can literally call me 310-789-2001, extension 323. That's 310, get a pen, 789-2001, extension 323. And don't worry, the podcast will continue. Today I got to speak with Stavroula Toska and Eleni Yiovas about their award-winning series, Switch. Now, Switch is the story based on Stavroula's experiences of going undercover and working as a dominatrix in New York City. Now, before you go prejudge this, as I did, let me tell you, you have never heard anyone describe the BDSM world before in this way. Stavroula is the creator, writer, actor, coming from a long career as a filmmaker, and Eleni is an executive producer and actor. The series features no less than Olympia Dukakis, John Lindstrom, and Cady McClain, and the episodes were directed by Cady McClain, Laurie Weltz, Cady Maguire, and Stavroula herself. Stavroula and Eleni sat down with me and spoke of this work with such empathy, compassion, and respect for humanity, vulnerability, and the ways in which we heal the world. Seriously, we brought up Brene Brown. You can find us at theother50%.com for added features, photos, show notes, and the merchandise. You can also listen on Apple Podcasts and all the podcast places. Also, the full season of Catch a Break, the insider's guide to getting into and navigating Hollywood, is now available on Apple Podcasts and all the podcast places and on the website, catchabreakpodcast.com. Go check that one out too. All right, here's my conversation with Stavroula and Eleni. Have a listen. Well, I am here today with Stavroula Toska and Eleni Yiovas. How'd I do with those names?
Well done.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So we're going to start by talking about your project called Switch. Mm-hmm. So Stavroula.
Yes.
Tell us about it.
All right. So Switch, it's a digital series that I created, and it's available now for people to see on switchtheseries.com. It is a web series based on a true story, and it actually explores my experiences of working as an undercover dominatrix in an elite BDSM dungeon in New York City.
So this is something you haven't heard every day, people.
No, I guess not, because we get that reaction a lot. I became a filmmaker and I started making documentaries. And at some point I heard the word dominatrix for the first time in my life. And I was already a grown woman in my early 30s. And I was like, well, is that a prostitute? Like most people think, right? Yeah. And my friend, I remember, who mentioned it to me, was like, no, you don't know that there's a bunch of guys who pay women to like humiliate them and beat them up and slap them around and submit to them and all sorts of stuff. And I was like, wait, stop.
What?
What? Yeah. So I remember going home that night and staying up literally all night till the wee hours of the morning and looking up into this whole BDSM, subculture, dominatrix, getting really fascinated. Not so much, definitely not by the violent aspects of it and the things that most of us know and are considered such taboo in our society, but really trying to, dig into and understand the psychology behind the men who go to these women and what they're looking for and
what is
why.
That about?
Yes. And the women who do this for a living and how, again, this whole taboo of thinking that a dominatrix is a prostitute when in essence, a dominatrix is a psychologist, is a woman who knows her own power, who understands a good dominatrix, a good professional dominatrix has incredible knowledge of human nature, and you really become a therapist and you build, these extreme bonds with your clients and you help them reach a whole other level of consciousness and healing and whatnot. So, one thing led to another. I started digging in and researching every chance that I had. And at the time I was working on another documentary, on Beneath the Olive Tree. And I thought to myself, well, I'm gonna do my research and I'm going to put together a proposal, and this exploring this underground world, but exploring it from a very different point of view. This is going to be my next project. And I looked at what was out there online and whatnot, and there was nothing like it. So there were things that were books or articles or whatever, things that were just scratching the surface. And I was like, there's got to be so much more than that. So my goal was to do a documentary where I get to put dominatrixes and their clients on screen, on camera, and follow them in their everyday life. And then when they go into the dungeon and the switch that happens in this exchange of power between the two sexes behind closed doors, right?
Uh-huh.
So,
now, hold on.
Yeah.
You were a filmmaker first.
Yes.
And this is a documentary?
And this was a documentary, yes. So as a filmmaker, I was focusing on documentaries at the time. And I had a background in acting, and I put that aside for a while because I wanted to get behind the camera and have control of the stories that I'm telling and the work that I put out there. So the original idea was that I would make a documentary until about a year and a half into researching all of this and finally feeling ready to go and approach dominatrixes in New York City, professionals, and ask them to introduce me to their clients and whatnot. And I started reaching out, and people were like, no.
Yeah, no one was going to be in the documentary.
And not really showing their faces and not really allowing me to follow them into the world of the BDSM and who they are, in the role they play in that world. Yeah, I was naive or ignorant or whatever you want to call it, but I was like, why would they not, but then also follow these people in their everyday life, when they pick up their kids from school, when they, they're with their family at home, and again, show the switch, right?
I mean, that would be a great documentary and a great reality show.
I think so too.
Yeah,
I think so too. Yes.
Participate in that.
Yes. And I very quickly realized that no one was going to participate in that. You're absolutely right. So then I was so into this world, and I was so, I started becoming very curious also about what is it that attracts me as Stavroula, as a woman who's 34 years old at the time. What is it that draws me so much, to this whole world? And one thing led to another. I was about to give up on it. And then I went online one last time and I said, well, Google, how does a woman in New York City start working as a dominatrix? And boom, all these ads came up. And one of the ads that came up at the time was for a very exclusive elite BDSM establishment in New York City. Whoever's visited, it was right by Bryant Park. They moved since, but it was right in an office building. They had the whole floor of an office building. Yes. The doorbell said imports, exports, yeah. And
in plain sight.
In plain sight, absolutely. They're everywhere, by the way. Those, private BDSM dungeons, and they're everywhere. People tend to think this as an underground, mysterious world, but it's very much above ground.
Yeah, it's right next to your dentist.
Yeah, and it's actually you working your 9 to 5 shift or your evening shift. It's like going to work at Macy's, your morning shift and your night shift or whatever. But so they were hiring at the time, and the ad was very short and to the point. Come in, and you don't need any experience. If you have potential, we will train you. Flexible hours, good money, legal work, no nudity, no stripping, no prostitution. And I was like, okay, pick up the phone, call them, don't tell them who you are and what, you're really going there for, and just show up for an interview. Yeah. So I went in for an interview, and within 5 minutes I was, offered a job, and I started working. I went in for an interview on a Friday, and that following Monday, I pretty much started the transformation from Stavroula to Mistress Cassandra. That was the name that I had picked for myself.
Oh my.
Yes. And I said I would do this for a week. And I was like, I'm going to bond with the girls, and I'm going to bond with the clients, and then I'm going to convince them to meet me outside of the dungeon and participate in my documentary. I was so stuck in, this idea of making a documentary.
Okay, now hold on.
Yeah.
Was there a training program?
Not really. I'm going to tell you why. Because, so this is a job where you go in, you start working, and you don't get paid unless you book sessions. And when you book sessions, quite often the tips are really good, because people come in to have an experience has nothing to do with sex, because they can get sex every other place pretty much, right? But they come in to have an experience that means the world to them and that they cannot have with anybody else in the world, pretty much. So they're willing to pay a lot of money for it, and they're willing to be very generous with their dominatrix. Again, if you're good at what you do. So the girls, I very quickly realized nobody wanted to train me, because to them, this new girl that walked in right now, who's tall, who's curvy, who has the long dark hair and the accent and everything, for me, that was like no big deal, very ordinary. I never saw myself as something oh my God. But to them, this was like, this bitch is going to take all our clients, pretty much. And I don't want to show her, I don't want to show her how to hang someone from the ceiling. And I don't want to show her how to, put someone on the electric chair, and none of that.
You just had to figure it out?
Yeah, and they were not bitchy, by the way. They were not, they were just either completely ignored me, or they refused to, with the exception of 2 girls, nobody else was really willing, to show me the ropes, like literally. So anyway, right? Yeah. So like literally. And then, the manager was good. She gave me a BDSM dictionary that pretty much explained every possible fetish that exists from A to Z. And this took my research, very helpful, but this took my research to a whole other level. And then I think what helped me in the beginning, and what helped me, my reputation, the Mistress Cassandra name, to really, come out in the circles pretty quickly, was that I was genuinely interested in getting to know the people who would come in, what they want, what they're looking for, and why. And it seemed that because we're not allowed to ask them personal questions, the fact that I would ask them if they would tell me their real name, just their first name, because every client was like a Tom, a John, or a Jimmy, or a Steve. I'm like, these 4 names.
What a coincidence.
I know, right? Yeah. But what really helped me was that I never pretended that I had with my clients that I had so much experience. If they wanted a specific type of session and to use equipment that I didn't know how to use and I couldn't figure it out on the spot, I would tell them, I don't feel very comfortable doing this. Can we start lightly, on the light side, and then move forward. And they were like so taken by this new mistress in the house and whatnot. So they were like, sure. But it was also developing that personal relationship, all the while thinking that this is someone that I would love to meet with outside and convince them to be in this freaking documentary. So taking the time to ask them their real name, to tell them my first real name, to ask them, why do you want this type of session? What is it about it that, attracts you to it, or that you enjoy, or what are you getting out of it? It was really kind of like stopping them in their tracks. And then don't forget, or for people who don't know, a dominatrix is dressed top to bottom at all times. Even though some outfits can be a little tight or a little revealing, but you're dressed, right? You're in control. You're covered up for the most part. But the clients are always taking their clothes off as soon as the session begins. And what that does to men is that it's the first step to them coming in touch with their vulnerability, and then start letting out whatever they're going to let out through the session. So having, feeling all powerful and in control and in charge, and being completely dressed top to bottom, and having this naked man across from you and asking him the question, why do you want a gas chamber fantasy? And this is a Jewish man, right? Why do you want a baby fetish fantasy? When did you start with this? Why do you want your cock and balls to be tortured and to be stepped on? And why are you looking for me to humiliate you? Things that I guess whoever is listening to us, they may sound so, not kinky, but so perverted and weird and whatever we want to call it. But then when you start asking these questions, and they open up and they tell you about their childhood, and they tell you what this type of session does to them and for them, it's the whole other world opens up in front of you, and a whole other side of human nature. Deep. And it goes, I'm telling you, for me, this job, I always say, people think I'm joking when I say that I wish that every woman will get to do this at some point in her life. Be in an environment like this, or even at home with your partner, right? With your partner in life, and have this type of role play and whatnot, because you will be amazed at how many things will just come up, and how many guys, how many men of all ages and ethnic backgrounds and religions, anything goes. You can find anybody you know in those dungeons, right? You would be amazed at how many things this person would like to reveal to you, but is afraid to do so for 10 different reasons. And they feel safe doing it behind the closed doors in a dungeon with a dominatrix. So it's quite something. It's a life-changing experience.
Well, it sounds like therapy.
No, yeah.
And you have to be so open and non-judgmental.
Yes, and this is something
crazy circumstance.
Absolutely, and this is something else that helped me, because a lot of these guys, even the younger ones, they've been in this lifestyle and they would never admit it and they would never talk about it openly. But they've been in this lifestyle for years, if not for decades, right? So, the moment you walk into the room as a dominatrix, and especially as the new girl that they meet, and you're like the 100th dominatrix they've session with, right away, you create an impression of them, but right away they create an impression of you. How you walk, how you look at them, and they pick up on if you're judgmental or not. And for me, at that point in my life, doing this, not as a 19 or 20-year-old girl, but as a grown woman who had been through some shit in her life already, and being completely open to just listen and take it in and see what we can make happen in this 1 hour or 8 hours that we're going to spend together. That was what helped, again, make me popular, even though I wasn't aware of what was happening outside of the dungeon and how my name had started spreading in those underground circles of BDSM. But
so who knew you had this gift?
I really, seriously, and I was like, it took me 34 years to figure it out in a dungeon of all places. You're right. Okay, and I think it's something that we all have, by the way. Yeah, I believe that.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, so then what happened with the documentary? How long did you do this work?
So I told myself that, Stavroula, you're going to be Mistress Cassandra for a week, maybe 2, and then you're just, you're getting out. Well, by the end of the first week at work, I looked at myself in the mirror and I didn't look the same. I kid you not. I just looking at a very different person.
In what way?
And I was loving it. I was standing taller. I was looking.
Oh, you found some power.
Like really, yeah. I learned how to really take my time and walk slower, and you cannot rush me. And I no longer rush to, grab a cab in New York City. It's like you own it. Everything you are, everything that's happening around you, you learn how to own it. And you start realizing, as women, we've given up so much power, but we've had so much power taken from us, right? And this is not about a battle of the sexes, or we're better, or with this, or no, this is about human beings and basic things that have to do with our confidence and, the confidence gap that we're talking about between boys and girls, men and women. So all of a sudden, I find myself in this environment that first week, and I was going in every single day because I thought I'm only going to be there for a week. So go the whole 7 days. And I just realized every time I would come out of work, I would look at the world with different eyes. And all of a sudden, I would get on the subway. I remember at the time, I lived up in Riverdale in the Bronx, and I remember going home at night and looking and observing people and picking up things that I had never picked up before in behavior and how young couples are on the train and whatnot. And this was fascinating and addictive and awesome.
And are you looking at every man in a suit on the subway differently?
Suit or not. I'm looking at construction workers differently. I'm looking at police officers differently. It's not just the suits on Wall Street and, the doctors and whatnot.
It's everybody.
When I tell you it's everybody, like I stayed in the dungeon for a little over 2 months, and then I got fired.
Why?
The manager who hired me, I almost don't want to say too much because it's part of the series.
Okay.
Because I ended up, instead of a documentary, I ended up staying into this world for 5.5 years, for almost 6 years. Because when I left the dungeon, a week or so later, I said to myself, well, you know what? It was meant to be, and I overstayed my welcome. And now I'm going to go and, connect with those people that I met. I'm going to find them, and I'm going to get the documentary done. But then I started missing it. I started missing the way I felt. the people that I had started developing this incredible bond, and that you see them completely, you look into their soul. It's as simple as that. And that was quite new and one of the most special times in my life, and I wasn't ready to give it up, right? So I started working as an independent dominatrix in New York City, which is a whole other ball game, which is a whole other, you put yourself at risk much more because you're not in a space that's protected by cameras and stuff. No, actually, there are dungeons, there are places in New York City that even if you're not a full-time employee there as a dominatrix, you can rent space. So
like a hairstylist, you can rent a chair.
Exactly. Yeah, you know what, Julie? It's as simple as that. Yeah. Huh. And again, it's a legal job, so you don't have to worry about, any much, but you gotta keep yourself safe. And at times, I remember one of my very best friends at the time, she was working at a hotel in Midtown Manhattan. Next time you go to New York, let me hook you up with a nice room and a discount.
You tell me.
Now I'm telling you. But so that being said, she was like, listen, because some guys, in order to make the fantasy more real and the role play, they don't want to be in a BDSM dungeon with chains hanging from the ceiling and handcuffs and all sorts of, whips and stuff. They want a very basic hotel room or whatever. So I did that, and I was renting space either from the dungeon for specific sessions and props that I needed, tools and whatnot, or at a hotel at the shifts that my friend was working on. So that way she would call me and say, okay, your client is coming up, and I have their ID at the front desk. So they knew also not to be, not to get smart or anything.
The things that go on in cities that we have no idea.
Yes. And the things that go on when somebody tells you, oh, honey, I'm going to meet the guys at the bar for a drink, or I'm going to the gym for like 2 hours or whatever.
Now that everyone is questioning their relationships.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. For me, it made me question every switch, right? You question everything you've ever been told and everything you've ever been taught and believed. Everything. You make the switch. You're like, well, what if?
Okay, so then what happened?
So what happened?
You wrote the...
So I started working as an independent dominatrix, making crazy money and meeting a whole other level of people, clientele and whatnot. And then I decided that this is not going to be a documentary. This is going to be a scripted series inspired based on a true story.
Yeah.
I wanted to go the studio route, but Hollywood has a way of, especially when you don't have a big name and whatnot, they have a way of, taking over your work and get stuck in development or never gets done, or they completely change it and you have no control over it. So I decided that I would do this in my own terms and really tell the story from a woman's point of view and not say it from a patriarchal point of view, which is why we think dominatrixes are prostitutes, and why, because it's decades of irresponsible storytelling,
well, 50
from
Shades
Hollywood.
of Grey, we were all trying to rescue her.
Yeah. I mean, I refuse to read the book or, watch the movies, but I've seen the trailers and I've heard people who watch them, people close to me. And I was like, no, please, no, let's not go back.
Okay. So it's not that.
Yeah, it's not that. Switch. It's completely the opposite, actually. And then, so I decided to do this in my own terms. And I wrote, the best way to do it was to create a short form, a web series. So I started raising capital and I wrote it, I directed it, I went back to acting. I hadn't acted in about 15 years and I decided to play the role of Cassandra, the main character Stella, who becomes Cassandra. And, I got someone like Eleni Yiovas and a great cast of characters, Academy Award winner Olympia Dukakis. Emmy winner Cady McClain acted and directed one of our episodes and produced. John Lindstrom.
This is amazing.
I know. All these incredible people, incredible actors that you would think, they would never do a web series, or you gotta go through their agents, or you gotta show up with an offer of XYZ thousands of dollars. I was like, here's the story, here's the script, here's why I want to do this. Are you with me or not? And it just started happening, the one after the other. So to see now the digital the digital series, which people can watch the trailer and read and watch the whole season 1 on switchtheseries.com, to see it gaining attention and people, buying it all around the world and winning awards all around the world.
You were just telling me you won your 8th award.
We picked up our 8th award like 2 days ago, and I still have to find time to announce it on our social media. Yeah, so the New York Women in Film and Television honored us with the best thriller action drama for 2018, wow. And they also honored me with the outstanding actress in the acting category. And then from then on, it's been nonstop. We won best web series in like 2 different festivals in India, and the Global Shorts Competition Best Series, and the pilot episode, which is also a standalone short film, has been getting us a lot of attention. And Eleni and I are in LA because we are going to participating at the Omni Cultural TV Expo tomorrow. So our pilot is screening in the drama category, and we're looking to develop this further and really tell stories and share, human everyday experiences in a way that's really never been done before. And it's riveting, and it's dramatic, and it's scary, and it's really funny at times, and it's human, and it's really approaching this whole world. It's not even about BDSM. It's just about human nature and how we connect and how we relate to one another, and the lengths we will go to just find our real self in a dungeon of all places. So it's,
That's it. You just said that so beautifully. That was really good.
It's a very important project to me, more than just, let's make a series and have fun. Like, this is just life-changing stuff that I'm talking about. And I really hope that this will get people to start opening up. Couples, I really hope, and most dominatrixes would probably hate me for saying this, but I really hope that couples will be able to be so honest with each other, so that the man doesn't have to go to a dominatrix to reveal his demons and do XYZ.
It sounds like you really see it as kind of a healing art.
Absolutely. Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
And it's interesting. I just watched that Brene Brown Netflix special.
I'm glad you brought that up.
Yes.
I mean, it ties in, doesn't it?
All the way.
In the strangest.
That was part of our homework.
Completely.
Before we started shooting.
Yeah.
So Stavroula had approached me about this project, and we were having dinner.
This is Eleni speaking, by the way. I haven't even introduced you
That's
yet.
Okay. But I'm so glad you brought up Brene Brown, because when she told me about the project over dinner, and she said, "Hey, I think I want you to play my best friend," and I'm like, "Okay, great." And she told me the story, and I was driving home, and I started thinking about it, and all of a sudden it started sinking in. And I couldn't sleep that night. And I wrote her an email that was probably like a chapter long.
Yes, it was a very long email.
Because I started to come to realize that this is bigger than a show.
Yeah.
The message is bigger than the show. And this was March 2017, right before Me Too. Mm-hmm. And so when the casting crew, everything was settled, we were going to shoot in October, she gave us homework assignment. She gave us the TED Talks from Brene Brown, mm-hmm. The Mask You Live In for about men, the documentary on Netflix, The Mask You Live In. And once I saw that, I even more so realized that this is about women and men and embracing men and what they're doing and what they're hiding. And it's not about like we can only talk about women in order for us to move forward. We also have to talk about men.
We have to.
And the vulnerability and the shame involved. And all of a sudden, as we're like scheduling in October, she had a whole woman cinematographer, women directors, and then the Harvey Weinstein thing blew. And this whole Me Too movement. And it was even more urgent for me to say, while they are getting, their due for what they've done, we need to embrace.
Yeah.
We need to embrace, because now everybody's going to think they're attacked. And it's a whole shift that's happening culturally, and we have to be careful. But I realize that this project is not about titillation, sensationalism, shock value, raciness. It's about human nature. And
it's another layer in the onion.
Yeah, absolutely.
How we're related.
And it was so important for me to get on board and help in any way I could, because I believe in projects that have a social significance in engaging conversations, evoking empathy, and maybe just inspiring a little bit of a social change in how we treat each other.
Yeah.
That's what actors do, is to evoke emotion and empathy and connecting either with yourself, with another human being in that experience.
That is the whole point.
That is the whole point for me.
Okay, tell us about you and your background real quick. Not real quick. Tell us about you and your background. And take as long as you like.
I'm a girl from Queens, born and raised. My parents came from Greece, immigrant story, came here with the shirt off their backs, worked really hard when you could save in New York at the time, and you could, if you were saving, do the American dream, which is like
back
almost
when you
impossible
could do the
now.
American dream.
Yeah, it's not really possible anymore. Even my parents would tell you, like, they couldn't have done what they've done in these kind of times, cost of living. Native New Yorker, been acting since I was 17 on and off because it's a tough business. 97% of us are unemployed. And I try to leave it, but it never left me. So I just stay true to myself, and have always wanted to tell stories in that way. And this was one story that I said, this is a story of a lifetime. And when I met her, she was doing her documentary for Beneath the Olive Tree, which was about women after the World War II, in the Civil War of Greece in the 1940s into 50, going and being in prison of being accused of communism. And all of a sudden from that, I knew her as that only. Mm-hmm. All of a sudden she's telling me about a project about her true life story, that she was a dominatrix. And I'm like,
you were like, what? I made people bleed, and I did this, and I did that, and I tortured them. And it's like, over fish tacos and margaritas, we were talking.
I was like, what's happening?
Your brain was splitting.
Yeah, like, who are you? What happened?
Yeah, and I knew about, what do I know about dominatrixes? Like, latex, femme fatales, whips, this, that, sex objectified.
Whenever they showed us on Real Sex
exactly,
on HBO.
Exactly, yep.
And then, it started sinking in. And I got curious. And I got curious about taking your power back and relations and exactly human nature. Mm-hmm. It's such a beautiful ride so far. It's been really great. I've been so honored and blessed to be on this journey with Stavroula and her telling the story.
I was going to say, I love that you brought up Brené Brown, because it was like, her TED Talks and her first book was, part of the homework. And she's someone that, as we move forward with this, show and whatnot, she's someone that I want to include actually in our team as a consultant, because her work also goes to a whole other level, and the commonalities are just way too many to just ignore it, right?
Yeah, so how do you get past that initial, because even when I got your email at first, I was like, do I want to go there?
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. But every time I've had that reaction, and then I've had the person to interview them, like, of course, by the end, I'm like, tell me more, So how do you get past that initial resistance of people just thinking it's...
So I will tell you, one of the things that I learned while doing this job, and I'm working on a book actually about, the valuable lessons that I learned from the men I dominated, right?
I was going to say, I want to read the book.
Excellent. Good. I'm working on it. We're looking for a publisher. So anybody listening out there, let's make it happen. But one of the many lessons that I learned is that to just, go where it's warm. Men are so good when it comes to not wasting their time. If something is just not happening, if someone doesn't want to listen, they just move on really quickly to the next thing. And that's why they also advance in business, in relationships. They get more of what they want than we do. It's a very different mentality and approach, right? So I've been reaching out to people, and obviously winning all these awards gives us a lot of leverage, and it shows that there's a real audience out there, because people were also like, I saw the trailer, it looks scary or it's dark, and I'm like, well, we're going places. We're taking you places. And I didn't want to hold back from the truth. And again, I didn't want to sugarcoat and make it like Hollywood candy wrap, type of story. But I came to terms and I made peace with the fact that there's going to be people who will get it right away. There's going to be people that I'm going to have to invest a little time to, make them see what I see. And there's going to be people who will just never, ever, ever get it. Yeah. And that's okay, because we got to keep moving, right?
Right.
So that's, But so far the response has been, we had, I recently wrote a story as a guest writer for HuffPost, and it got a lot of attention and a lot of, feedback and whatnot. But, the comments that kept coming up from men and women were like, whoa, I had no idea. I'm like, I always thought a dominatrix is like a nice way to call yourself a prostitute, really, pretty much, a fancy way or whatever. And that has a lot to do with a lot of, women who work as prostitutes and disguise themselves as dominatrixes, because it's legal in most states, and most places around the world and most states in America. But you're not everybody's cup of tea. And as women, we raised and we're conditioned to smile and please everybody and be the need to be liked and approved. Yeah. And I learned not to give a fuck. You either like me or you don't, and I'm okay. I'm okay if, we walk out of here today and, you say that, I never want to see them again. I don't even know what.
I'm never putting that on
know what I mean? I've learned to be okay with that and keep moving. And that's how you find your tribe and your people.
You'll find your people.
It's all good, yeah.
Well, and also here when you talk about it, like in 5 minutes, you get it. I get it.
Good. By the way, there is, on our pilot episode, the last scene, which was beautifully directed by Cady McClain, is with John Lindstrom, when my character has now started working as Cassandra, Mistress Cassandra, and then she goes to see her therapist, and she's Stella again, right? And she has this whole conversation that was sparked by the last session she had with a client, Frankie, which is, the client is played by Gabriel Furman from the Actors Studio, and he's giving, these performances, these guys, the way they came through to say, I know exactly what this is about, and I get it, and this is why I relate to this character, and this is what it means to me to play this character. Julie, amazing.
Were you going to therapy as you were doing this job?
No, because that was my therapy. It really was the best therapy I've ever done in my life. I kid you not. Something very special happens when the lights are lowered and you shut all the noise out and you're with this other person in this room. Because even though you're, as a good professional dominatrix, my job was to focus on them and what they're looking for and how to get things out of them and whatnot. So it escaped me completely in the beginning, the healing that was taking place within me and the things that were coming up for me and how light I could feel, no matter how emotionally and physically exhausted I was at the end of the day, at the end of my shift. I also felt so light, like I could fly. It was incredible how many nights I would leave work and I wanted to walk and walk and walk before I take a cab or get on the train because I felt so incredible, right? So there is a great scene, I was going to say, with John Lindstrom at the end of the pilot episode 1, that pretty much, like you said, you get it within 5 minutes. In that scene and the conversation my character Stella has with her therapist, Dr. Dixon, yes, exactly, who represents the patriarchy and what we're being told and doubting what she says, and he knows best, she doesn't, right? It wraps up pretty much what this whole project is about. So when people watch it, they're going to know exactly what I'm talking about. And John Lindstrom was a dream to work with. I know he's on Bosch right now and he's nominated for another Emmy, and I really hope he wins because he's just one of the most generous, kind, wonderful men. And to see him on set with Cady actually was very special. Yeah, with the missus. Oh, can I say something else?
No,
as I bring up crack the whip, Julie.
Just kidding. What do you want to say?
You learn fast.
I was going to say that I really hope for a lot of men, but also for a lot of men who raise daughters that, hopefully will listen to this, or they raise boys, but also for women, there's so many words, there's so much power that has been taken away from us. And when I say power, I don't mean in that patriarchal sense of where I'm the boss and what I say goes and I need to
over people.
Yes, exactly. But exactly that power within and that knowing, who you are and what you're about and living your life accordingly. But the word mistress, back in the days, we're talking about centuries ago, there's an excellent book called The ABC of the Goddess, or The Vocabulary of the Goddess, and I can't remember the author at this time, which it's a shame, but it's easy to find it online. And it talks about how certain things, when, religion started taking over, and men and politics, and all they wanted to do was, start wars and conquer and keep the women at home. That's when the switch started happening, right? And how words like mistress, for example, and mistress was a title that was given to women of a certain age, of a certain level in society, and it was an honorary title because it became, the younger woman or the spinster who sleeps with a married man. She's a mistress. Same thing. I'm Greek. Eleni is Greek. We, Olympia, Dukakis. We always talk about, the power of words and the importance of fully understanding the words that we're using and how we're using them. Medea, which is a very famous, tragedy from ancient Greece. Medea Medea was an honorary title that was given to very special women in society that were right below the levels of a goddess, right? And then Euripides was hired by the government to write a play to turn Medea into this crazy woman who was jealous of her husband because he now was in love with a younger woman and he wanted to leave her, and she goes and kills her children. So all of a sudden it became disgraceful to give this honorary title. So things like that, and how it shifted over a period of centuries, and we're completely off balance. Everything is like, we're dealing with everything that we're dealing because we have been thrown completely off balance. So these are the themes that are running through the series and that we explore: conditioning from a young age for girls and for boys, and how we all end up where we are today, and what can really be done to, So that's why I said this is a very important,
incredibly timely.
I think so too.
Are you from Greece?
I was born and raised in Greece, and I moved to New York about 18 years ago. Yeah, and I started building my life in New York.
Wow! Did you come to be an actress?
I came to be an actress. I came to studied at the American Academy of Dramatic Arts. However, I realized a few years after I was here that that was never the reason why I left home. It was the excuse, but not the reason. But I knew from a very young age that in order for me to be able to fly and spread my wings and, satisfy my curiosity, I had to leave home, because I was always treated differently than my brother. The Greeks are a very patriarchal society to this day, even though funny or not funny, but there's dungeons opening in Greece left and right. Like, I get updates from different, websites and whatnot. So this is becoming like the popularity of BDSM and, these men who want to hide and submit to a woman and play XYZ fantasy for ABC reason. It's becoming more and more popular all around the world. So even Greece now, we got requests for the series, and they were like, you need to create Greek subtitles because this is going to be huge. Like, you're missing out on a whole other market. Then we kept getting emails from deaf people, from the deaf community, saying that how can you not have closed captioning? There's a whole other audience that's into BDSM, and you're thinking because we're deaf or mute that we're not into this type of,
You're thinking, I'm doing this for free.
I know. I'm like, oh my God, now we have to pay and get closed captioning. But you get those emails, like, I watched it and I was able, oh wow, and I relate with this character. And when are you going to, get out more, produce more episodes? And I want to see what's happening with, that person or that mistress.
It's as universal as any other world, right?
Yeah.
You would say like The Sopranos, or you would say any other world. It's about the family relations and the relations between the people.
It's about the people,
It's about the people in the end, because that's what it's always about. You can have Game of Thrones with dragons, but what's it really about?
It's about the people in the
and who's got power, and who's controlling that power, who's doing what to whom, and who's winning and why.
Yeah.
So BDSM is like an ultimate power structure that has the deepest well of like vulnerability in human nature.
Yeah, humanity. Man. And then it's interesting because, it's, for bondage. And I always, I would speak with my clients because I'm still in touch with a lot of them, and they watch the series and they absolutely loved it, which for me, and a lot of dominatrixes and people in the industry have reached out to say, who are you? How come I never met you? I was in New York City doing it. Did you work here? Did you do parties there? Did you?
And then they say you nailed it.
Yes. And that was, again, that's why I wanted to avoid going the Hollywood route, because, there's shows and dominatrix, characters have been depicted in different, movies and that, and they end up being these caricatures with the big boobs or the, perfect looking Asian girls or, and it's just, you could be a dom, and Eleni could do it, and every female, because there's no shape or body type or ethnicity or height or whatever, that anything goes. The same with the clients, the same with the dominatrix. It's all about the attitude. It's all about what's happening up here in your head and in here in your soul. Everything else just falls into place. Let's also not forget how many men, we would have so many white men, that typical New York successful guy with a beautiful young wife, a couple of kids or whatever, place up on Fifth Avenue or Madison or whatever. And he would come in and they would pick, the African American dominatrixes or the Pakistani girl or the Indian girl, because that's the type of woman they're into, but they would never date somebody like that. They would never marry somebody like that, right? So this is their way of satisfying that craving and, being around a person like that. It's so deep, and it's so, again, conditioning, right?
What I wanted to ask you, Eleni, what do you think is kind of the next step in, because it is like gender roles are shifting, power dynamics are shifting, the rise of the divine feminine, also the rise of the divine masculine. Where do you think we are in that? What do you think is next?
As in the society, or as
a society?
Switch? I think the fact that people like Brene Brown coming out, master social researchers coming out and getting a platform like on Netflix. And yes, again, Brene Brown is so approachable. She can call herself an introvert. She's
and so relatable.
So relatable and so funny. Like, who wants to hear her talk about shame and vulnerability? Well, once she starts and you start finding yourself laughing, she gets you in.
Laughing and crying.
And you're not uncomfortable. I think we're on the brink of scratching the surface of being able to give ourselves permission that vulnerability is not weakness. If you can be vulnerable, actually it's pure strength.
Yeah.
You have to be bold and courageous. You have to do things in the face of your fear and trembling. I always related vulnerability with weakness, and I'm only coming to terms with it myself now. And I could only hope that, especially for men, that the vulnerability is strength. You can cry. The toxic masculinity has to go. It's not serving them. Never mind what it's doing to us.
It's not serving anybody. It's like enough already.
You're right. You're absolutely
right. We need to embrace them.
And the way she laid it out was like, oh, obviously.
She's, yes.
But the thing is that,
it all
how
makes
it is.
sense. Yeah.
Intellectually, we all understand and we agree and we're watching that, but put it into practice.
Then to do it.
Challenge yourself on a day. Say something that you hesitate to say. Step out of that comfort zone. Like, we know it intelligently. We see memes. We read books. I'm constantly reading books, but you're going to have to delve in and do the work. And that's where I'm hoping, like, the next level of society is going to, is to really push your own boundaries and free yourself. It's so liberating to say, this is not going to have a hold on me anymore. I'm not afraid. I am afraid, but I'm going to do it anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it is work. It's a lot of conscious effort.
It is a lot of work. And this is why dungeons and dominatrixes make such a great living. I mean, there's a reason for it.
I wanted to ask, did you make good money?
Oh my God, crazy money. I miss it very much, actually. I miss the experiences and the meeting of the new people and the pushing of boundaries to see how I could, but because there were sessions that I cried along with the client, right? Or I was turned on along with the client. That, happened too. But I miss the money very much, let me tell you. As an independent filmmaker, I'm like, let's get a deal already and develop this Switch series with like an HBO or something, or a Hulu or whatever, because we gotta, But at some point I also had to decide what is going to be my focus from now on. And I was like, part of my goal in life is to, I did with Beneath the Olive Tree and other projects that I have written, directed, produced, is to put these stories out there for a wider audience. So I had to say, okay, what you focus on grows, and right now I need to focus on that next step in the process of, doing this. But being in touch with my former clients and hearing their news and telling them that, they want to write for my blog and all of that stuff, that's all really wonderful. I also want to say that I find vulnerability to be very sexy. And it wasn't until, again, in my 30s, working as a dominatrix inside a BDSM dungeon, when I was like, oh my God, this is just pure love, and it's beautiful, and it's what's happening right now in this moment between, two people, and it's very sexy.
As an outsider, so you have me like learning about the project, being offered to play the best friend. I was so honored and everything. And I have no idea about BDSM. I'm like, oh, it's something like people like to get beat up and like have golden showers. And I'm like,
some weird something.
Some latex and whatever. That's nice. I don't know about that. And then because my curiosity was piqued about the human condition more and more, I was more accepting of like just listening to whatever the fetishes were or whatever the expression was. And I started experimenting by just dropping to see like how many people are really interested in this, because I wasn't really, but for my own reasons, because I had this stereotype idea. And all of a sudden I would say the word BDSM and you would see somebody in the corner of a restaurant turn around and perk their head. Women, men, all ages, 20-year-olds, 18-year-olds. I was at the gym one day, I was taking a class, And we had this beautiful, gorgeous trainer. She's like a master, and she turned around and she's, everybody was like, okay, yeah, boss. The music dropped. And I said, yes, mistress, as an experiment. Everyone turned around. Like it was like almost like a Pavlov bell of the dog. They were like, and then they turned around back to hide they had a reaction to it. So I'm like, everyone's going to watch this. Huh. I had no idea. I was taking my own temperature of what's going on with this, because it's percolating. You hear about dominatrixes in billions. It's percolating. 50 Shades of Grey we mentioned. But that's just the stereotype also being reinforced. We want to tell the real story of the dominatrix. That's more interesting to me.
That's why I thought also switch, which is a term that we use in BDSM for the exchange of power, the switching of the roles, right? Mm-hmm. I thought it was such a perfect title in for so many reasons. I was going to say before, we've also recently, speaking of all of this and Brené Brown and whatnot, we were approached by an educational licensing company. They read about it on Huffington Post. Yes, they read about the story that I wrote on Huffington Post, and they didn't even reach out to ask for a screener. They just bought and watched the whole series. And they reached out and they said, we want to get the rights to, exclusive in the US, Canada, Australia, and then non-exclusive in Europe and Asia, because we think this has tremendous value. And I think I started saying before that sex psychologists have reached out, either for interviews or to say that I watch your series. You have done incredible work. You're approaching the subject from a very humane, respectful, I want to understand point of view. Like you said in the beginning, without judging. Yeah. And with that character of Stella, I wanted to keep her very true, that this is a woman who looks that she should have everything figured out and have the good marriage by now. But she doesn't know shit. And she walks into that world and, this whole other universe is opening up in front of her. But with that character also, she takes the audience by the hand and we explore it together as it unfolds, right? So to have psychologists take the time to email us and say, I have certain patients that I'm going to recommend this series to because I know it will absolutely help them with XYZ. And when are you going to be producing season 2? Or this is like, it's just, thank you very much. Yeah, I feel very fortunate. I feel very blessed to have people like Eleni and everyone in our production team. I mean, we ended up with a bunch of women, not because of the Me Too or Time's Up movement. We just wanted the best people for the job. Yeah. So our, editor, cinematographer, like when you watch the series, you're like, this is not a web series. This is like already an HBO show or a Hulu show. It's incredible. So I feel very, very blessed. And I think that this is also happening because the intention is right, and it's been said, and I'm like, Stavroula, just enjoy the ride. And it's like, it's been really great.
Have you sent it to HBO?
We're trying to get someone. Yeah, we have a good feeling about that, but we're trying to attach someone that would, open that door, that has a development deal with them.
Yeah. So we can go in and
in my heart. Very up their alley.
I think so too, yeah.
Has a special place in my heart, HBO. Because I used to work for a documentary filmmaker named Mark Levin, and I just always thought they were on the cutting edge. Always. And wow. And it's home box office, yeah. So my first credits were on HBO, and I think they would do well with this.
All right, HBO, I know you're listening.
Right.
So I want to ask what's next for you, but it sounds like this is what's next for you.
Yeah, well, what's next is, I have planned out like 6 seasons for this series. And I have planned them, outlined them as a full-blown episodic, like a full-blown TV series, right? So a couple of things. We have also, aside from the educational licensing, which was a really nice surprise and something that I honestly didn't see coming.
Yeah.
Even though I understand the educational value of it, I never thought that there's going to be a distribution, educational licensing company that would want to send this out to all the colleges and stuff. Now, fun fact for everyone listening, Harvard, Cornell, Columbia University, Princeton, they all feature BDSM clubs for their students. So I know. These are some of the most prestigious educational institutions in the world, not just in America. They all feature BDSM clubs for their students because they realized at some point, Harvard was the first one, if I'm not mistaken, but they realized at some point that our students experiment and play like that. So let's bring a psychologist once a week or a dominatrix to show them how to, to avoid hurting each other. Kids, they experiment, they do all sorts of stuff. Yeah. And really make it okay on campus. So you have the book club and the rowing club and the BDSM club. And it says a lot that these major institutions are setting, are opening the path pretty much. So when I first heard about that, I was like, oh my God, this is like great. So then when we got the educational licensing offer, I was like, Stavroula, duh, of course, it makes sense, because they felt very confident that this is going to do really, really well. And so this is one thing, because we're putting together now the whole package for educational licensing. The other thing is that, I'm ready to start pitching this to networks and studios and whatnot to develop it further. And then after that, it's also the book that I've been writing. Yeah. So there's a couple of things that we're keeping busy with. So fingers crossed.
You're doing for BDSM what Orange is the New Black did for prison.
Yes. So that's yeah. Actually, I thought that Genji, the showrunner, the EP for Orange is the New Black would probably be, because she understands this, restricted world where all these people are in, but then we follow them outside in their everyday lives as well, and trying to see, how everything, how they meet each other. So I thought she might be a good fit for this. So she's someone that we're trying, to get to and, pitch the project to her to see if she would want to jump on board, and a couple of other really solid showrunners that we could partner with and take this to the networks. So that's a big one.
Okay. What advice do you have for people coming up behind you?
For people coming up behind me, tell the stories that you want to tell. Don't focus so much on what's trendy in the business right now, what you think would open the door, what you think is going to get you a premiere at Sundance. Tell the stories that are so meaningful to you and that only you and your voice can bring them to the world. And be ready to work hard, because there's no shortcuts. And enjoy the ride along the way, because sometimes you remind me, Eleni reminds me, and a couple of other people in my life, another award, let's go for a drink. And I'm like, no, I have to write another chapter. They're like, stop, let's go for a drink and celebrate the article that came out, the interview, like enjoy those moments, because it's part of the process. Yeah. But really, be mindful, have a mind for business and understand the business. Find the people that are your tribe, your people. Don't keep hitting on the doors of those big agencies hoping that representation is going to do everything for you. Let them come to you. Build it and they will come. And really tell the stories that, for me, with every project that I've been involved so far, because everything takes so much work and so long to get done, if it doesn't mean the world to me to be involved in the telling of a particular story, I just don't do it. So I would say, focus on that. Focus on that. Yeah. And crack the whip. Don't be afraid, especially for the women. Don't be afraid to confront people, to crack the whip, to be very clear when you communicate what you need, what you want, how you want it done. Just fucking be fierce. Be, the powerhouse. Yeah, be the powerhouse that you are. This is another thing. I'm starting a workshop called Domination Without Hesitation. Because one of the things that's very problematic with us girls, with us women, is that even if we were given all that power in the world right now, we hesitate. We don't know what to do with it. We feel we don't deserve it. No.
We need permission.
We need permission. And then afterwards we need feedback. Is that okay?
Enough.
Approval.
Enough. Olympia Dukakis always says to me, when I go to her, I'm like, I'm thinking about doing this, but she was like, who the fuck cares? You want to do it? Just do it. But how? How do you figure everything else out that you do? Figure it out. Use what you got up here in your head. It's bigger and greater than we think. Yeah.
Okay. For someone like me who's an actor or is approached by a project, I would say do projects that you really believe in. Exactly. Not what you think people will like. I try to sometimes, even in my acting, sometimes I catch myself saying, I'll make them laugh. No, just be honest. And everything else will come out. And really, if you're going to believe in something, put in 100%. You got to be honest with yourself. And our favorite actors in the whole world, were they the most gorgeous actors? No, they were the most truthful ones. Mm-hmm. And that's what people connect to. And once I heard about this story, whether I knew, I didn't have a script, I didn't have anything. I was like, I'm in. Listen to your gut. Go with it. Don't conform. Don't try to please everybody. Be honest. And you'll save yourself a lot of time and grief. And hook up with people who you want to be part of your tribe.
You find your people.
Yeah.
All right, Kim,
And go to switchtheseries.com and watch the series, and feel free to reach us out and share your thoughts
Check out
and
our
whatnot.
Yeah.
Because we love hearing from our fans. We love getting those emails, no matter how long or short they are, and hearing, what people felt or what they thought, or the fact that they were like, I sat down and I watched it with my boyfriend or with my wife. And it was like a whole different conversation we had when we were done watching.
Wow.
Wonderful.
The feedback is beautiful.
I'll link to it on my website.
Thank you. Thank you.
Is there anything else that I should have asked you that I didn't ask you? Either one of you?
Oh my goodness. I feel like we talked about so much, and it was like such a nice and easy conversation, and we probably could go on for another hour, but I think it was great. I think it was great.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Julie.
Thank you,
and everyone for
so
listening.
much.
Thank you so much. We
This
appreciate
has been
it.
wonderful.
You've been listening to The Other 50%, a herstory of Hollywood. I'm Julie Harris Walker. I'd like to thank Stavroula Toska and Eleni Yiovas for sharing their story. You can find the series at switchtheseries.com. And special thanks to Jay Rowe, Danny Rosner, and Allison McQuaid for the music. Please find us on your favorite podcast provider and leave a review. And of course, on our website, theother50%.com, all spelled out in letters, for added features, bios of our guests, and the merch. You can also follow us on all the social media platforms. And also go subscribe to catchabreakpodcast.com. Thanks for listening. See you next time.